No one inside that prison had any idea that what started as the most ordinary morning of the month would turn into the day Redstone Valley would never forget. All it took was an old man stepping into the center of the yard's fighting pit for everything to shift, and for 3 of the most feared inmates there to make the biggest mistake of their lives. The sun beat straight down on the sand ring, lighting up every expression, every taunt, every hostile stare. Around it, hundreds of inmates packed in tight, forming a loud, restless living circle, hungry for another display of brute force. Redstone Valley's yard was infamous. Inmates joked that it produced its own viral videos, beatdowns, humiliations, falls that looked like slow-motion disasters. They called it the Pit of Despair. But what they were about to witness wasn't another show. It was something else entirely. A lesson about respect, power, and identity. At the center stood 3 massive men radiating aggression. Drax, Marlowe, and Gunnar, better known as the 3 Fists. Drax, the most violent of them, looked especially restless. He stepped forward slowly, crushing sand beneath his boots, lips curled into a mocking grin. And everyone watching knew exactly what that grin meant. Someone wasn't walking away from this one. And then the old man appeared. He didn't run. He didn't hesitate. He didn't lift his fists. He simply walked in, slow, steady, wearing a torn, stained shirt, patched with stories no one there had ever heard. His age-marked chest didn't match the quiet solidity in the way he carried himself. In one hand, he held a bottle, like he'd wandered out of some imaginary prison tavern, a detail that drew laughs and jeers from every direction. Elias Mercer. That was the name no one took seriously. Drax stepped toward him, pointing a finger right in the old man's face, close enough that the air itself seemed to charge. "Old man, what the hell do you think you're doing here?" he sneered, his finger almost touching Elias's chest. "This isn't a retirement home. You planning on challenging somebody real?" The laughter came instantly. Some inmates clapped, egging Drax on. Others just waited for the inevitable, the fall that would send adrenaline shooting through the yard faster than any gang fight. Elias didn't answer. He simply studied his bottle, tilting it under the sunlight, as if whatever was inside was far more interesting than Drax's threats. That calmness, that indifference, irritated Drax in a way no one expected. He stepped forward and jabbed Elias with his finger, and the roar of the crowd burst into wild anticipation. Except something was wrong. Something subtle, unnoticed by most but impossible to miss once you caught it. Elias didn't stumble. He didn't lose balance. He didn't show fear. He stood firm, like someone trained, conditioned to never retreat. Drax laughed, assuming the old man was in shock or too slow to react. Marlowe and Gunnar joined in, loosening their shoulders, ready to enjoy yet another easy humiliation. The crowd shouted, convinced Elias would be crushed within seconds. But that quiet stillness, the one visible only in the old man's eyes, hid a past none of them could imagine. Elias Mercer wasn't some frail senior. His name, erased from every official record, had once been whispered among generals, black ops agents, and elite soldiers across the world. Elias wasn't just a veteran, he was a legend. The last living commander of the most feared and silent unit in modern military history, the Shadow Unit, a team specializing in infiltration, extraction, counter-operations and missions deemed impossible even by intelligence agencies. A ghost trained not only to survive chaos, but to use it. A man who carried decades of medals no one could display, stories no one could tell, and scars tied to missions the government would never admit happened. But to Drax, to Marlowe, to Gunnar, to the inmates watching, he was just an old man. And that's exactly what sealed their fate. Drax moved in again, lifting his gloved hand to shove Elias, this time hard enough to knock him down and draw applause. But before his fingers even reached the old man's shirt, Elias slowly raised his eyes. No fear, no hesitation, only the quiet warning of someone who knows the weight of his own history. The entire yard felt the shift. It wasn't a yell. It wasn't a sudden move. It was subtle, but deep enough that even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Because in that instant, in that tiny electric moment, everyone realized Drax had just disrespected the most dangerous man in that prison. A man who didn't go looking for fights, but who knew exactly how to end them. And Redstone Valley would never be the same after that. Redstone Valley wasn't just a prison. It was a closed ecosystem. A place where social rules bent in their own strange directions, and every gesture, every glance, every step determined who was predator and who was prey. In there, physical strength was only the surface. Real power came from influence, fear, and reputation, and the Three Fists ruled that hierarchy because they commanded all three. Drax was the emotional core, volatile, unpredictable, incapable of backing down once provoked. Marlowe was the operational mind, observant, calculating, the kind who spotted patterns where everyone else saw chaos. Gunnar was the blunt force, silent, intimidating, a walking wall built to crush whatever stood in his way. Among the inmates, the trio held almost mythical status. They controlled the pit, decided who fought, who got protection, and who was thrown to chance. Their names were whispered like a parallel law inside the prison, one no one dared defy, until that day. Elias Mercer stepping into the ring wasn't just strange, it was impossible to process. No one could understand why a man like him, quiet, solitary, seemingly fragile, would walk voluntarily into an arena ruled by the most violent men inside Redstone Valley. To the inmates, he was nothing more than a curious old figure who wandered the yard in silence, always watching more than speaking. Some said he was lost inside his own mind. Others thought he was just an aging inmate, trying to survive the last stretch of a hard life in a hostile prison. But the truth was far deeper. For weeks, Elias had been studying every move in that yard, not with the eyes of an ordinary inmate, but with the attention of someone trained to analyze risks, patterns, strategy, behavior. He knew who led, who followed, who feared, and who pretended bravery. He understood exactly how Drax enforced his reign, not just with brute strength, but with psychological terror and the constant need to prove dominance. Drax was the kind of man who needed to be seen, feared, obeyed, which made him entirely predictable to someone like Elias. The guards were part of the ecosystem too. Some pretended not to see fights to avoid trouble. Others used the pit to diffuse tensions and keep rival factions busy. The administration knew that, brutal as it was, the arena worked as a pressure valve. As long as things didn't cross a certain line, they preferred letting the inmates settle their disputes there. But there was one thing even the guards didn't know. Elias had been placed in Redstone Valley for reasons none of them would ever understand, reasons recorded nowhere. Elias's military past was invisible in that environment. His scars blended in with every other inmate's scars. His quiet strength was mistaken for exhaustion. His composed posture looked like fragility, but inside him still lived the commander who had led men on missions with no return, the man who had crossed jungles, deserts, and war zones, who had faced situations where failure meant vanishing from the world without a trace. Every fiber of his body carried the memory of decades of extreme training, discipline, and survival. Nothing about him was accidental. Drax, on the other hand, was the opposite in every way, shaped by street life, gang fights, and a trail of impulsive violence that got him transferred twice before ending up there. To him, power was immediate, proven by punches, shouts, and intimidation. Elias represented everything he despised, someone who refused the game, who couldn't be intimidated, who didn't rise to provocation. That calm old man unnerved Drax more than any inmate ever had. And that's exactly why Drax dragged Elias into the center of the arena, Not for a fair fight. Drax had never offered anything fair, but to humiliate him in front of everyone, reinforce his dominance, and show that no man, young or old, could rise above him inside Redstone Valley. The spectators had their own expectations. Many crowded in just to watch a fragile man fall. Others hoped Elias would back down and walk away. A very small number, almost insignificant, felt something else. A strange discomfort, an instinct they couldn't explain, a feeling that this wouldn't end the way the trio imagined, because everything about that morning carried something different. The silence before the confrontation, the old man's steady posture, the way he held the bottle like part of some internal ritual, the look in his eyes, tired but glowing with something no one could read. And deep inside that prison, carved by violence, a quiet truth began to form. This wasn't just a yard fight. It was a collision of worlds. Chaos meeting deadly experience. Arrogance clashing with wisdom. Cheap violence facing real strength. And Elias Mercer was about to show everyone the difference. The circle of inmates closed in around the arena just as quickly as the tension rose. The sand, scarred by the heavy footsteps of countless fighters, seemed to vibrate under the pressure of hundreds of anxious eyes. The three fists stepped forward a few inches, boxing Elias Mercer in with calculated precision. They were experts at creating a spectacle, stirring up the crowd, magnifying the moment, turning any hesitation from an opponent into a punchline. And Drax, standing at the center, lived for moments like that. He raised both arms as if he were some shaved-head gladiator feeding off the approval of the mob. "Look at this, boys," he shouted, his voice bouncing off the concrete walls. The grandpa from North Block finally woke up and decided to play with the grown-ups. The crowd erupted, laughter, whistles, jeers. Everything in that yard seemed designed to break the old man in front of everyone. Drax took 2 more steps forward, finger still pointed, the veins in his neck bulging, his face twisted in contempt and the thrill of cheap violence. Marlowe and Gunnar, positioned just behind him, were ready to jump in if the old man dared do something bold. To them, this was routine, just another show of dominance, but Elias didn't seem to hear any of it. He lifted the glass bottle, examining it against the sunlight as if the liquid inside mattered more than the 3 men preparing to tear him apart. That simple movement threw the trio off balance. It didn't make sense. No one ignored Drax like that. No one treated an explicit threat with that level of tranquility. It hit their egos harder than any insult ever could. Drax moved again, this time more violently, shoving Elias in the chest with enough force to knock any normal man flat. The crowd inhaled sharply, waiting for the old man to collapse like a puppet with cut strings. But Elias didn't fall. He didn't budge. He didn't even shift his weight. Marlowe's eyes widened. Gunnar leaned forward instinctively, baffled. Drax frowned, as if reality itself had malfunctioned. "I told you to get out of here," he snarled, gearing up for another shove. This one meant to end it. That's when Elias finally moved his head. A slow, almost lazy motion, lifting his gaze to meet Drax's. His eyes showed no anger, no fear, not even irritation, just a deep, dangerously quiet emptiness, the kind carried by seasoned soldiers who've spent decades in places where hesitating for 1 second meant dying. That brief exchange lasted only moments. But for anyone who understood instinct, body language, or threat assessment, the truth was obvious. Elias was studying Drax. Not the shove, that part was trivial, but the source of it. He was assessing his posture, his center of gravity, how he placed weight on each foot, his movement patterns, the impulsiveness in his shoulders, the rhythm of his breathing, all of it silently, calmly, without rush. Elias was reading him like an open book. Drax, oblivious, decided to finish things. He stepped back to build momentum and lifted his gloved hand for the first strike. It would be classic humiliation. Drop the old man with one fast punch and parade his inevitable victory. The crowd went wild. Adrenaline peaked. Elias remained still. When Drax's fist shot forward in a straight line, Elias moved only 2 centimeters, just enough for the punch to slice through empty air. The crowd froze. Drax froze even more. Marlowe's eyebrows knitted. Gunnar's arm lifted instinctively. That dodge wasn't normal. It wasn't random. It was the precision of someone who'd been doing that motion since before many of them were born. Humiliated, Drax swung again, a looping hook this time. Elias rotated his torso slightly, slipping past it with the casual ease of someone adjusting his stance to get comfortable. Marlowe was the first to understand. Hey, something's wrong. He's not just some old man. He knows what he's doing. But it was too late for Drax to pull back. The third attack came like a desperate lunge. No technique, just brute force. That's when Elias made his first active move. It wasn't a strike. It wasn't a kick. It wasn't aggression. He simply lifted the hand holding the bottle and touched Drax's arm at the exact moment the attacker's own momentum threw him off balance. The contact lasted less than half a second, but it was enough. Drax stumbled, spun involuntarily, and dropped to his knees in the sand, sending up a cloud of dust. The crowd roared. Gunnar stepped forward on instinct. Marlowe tried to reassert control, but Elias didn't move. He watched it unfold like a man who already knew every outcome before it happened. Right there in that moment, everything shifted. The 3 fists weren't standing before a defenseless old man anymore. They were facing someone who understood the real weight of violence, someone who could control a situation without raising his voice, someone carrying a past none of them had the capacity to comprehend, and even if no one realized it yet, the first crack in Drax's reign had just appeared, caused by the most unlikely man in the entire prison. The impact of Drax hitting the sand echoed far beyond the arena. It wasn't just a stumble or a loss of balance, it was a symbol, a shockwave that rippled through the prison corridors like an electric whisper. The inmates watching stood frozen between disbelief and confusion. None of it made sense. It shouldn't have happened. Drax didn't fall. Drax made others fall. Drax controlled the rhythm of the yard. And yet there he was, hands pressed into the sand, struggling to catch his breath, while Elias stood over him, silent and unmoving. But the arena was never just the arena. Drax's fall shook deeper foundations inside Redstone Valley, the kind people rarely noticed but that governed life behind those walls more than any rulebook ever could. Rival factions started murmuring. Men who had never dared raise their heads began glancing around with a different light in their eyes. The power balance that kept the 3 fists at the top was starting to crack, slowly but undeniably. The first reaction came from inside the pit itself. Gunnar stepped forward, ready to attack immediately, but Marlowe threw an arm in front of him. Marlowe wasn't impulsive like the others. His eyes flicked from Elias to Drax, then to the crowd. He understood the social magnitude of what had just happened. "Easy," he muttered, so low it was almost swallowed by the arena. "This isn't just a fight. This could turn into something else." Gunnar clenched his fists and breathed hard, but stepped back. Even so, the tension in him was unmistakable. Gunnar was a man of action, not analysis. Whatever Elias had just done rattled him in a way his instincts understood, even if his mind couldn't. Across the yard, behind the bars of the second block, a man watched the scene with careful interest. His name was Donovan Price, known to a few as the Architect. He wasn't strong like Gunnar or volatile like Drax, but he controlled information, and inside a prison, information was worth far more than muscle. Donovan saw patterns where others saw nothing, and the way Elias moved in that ring lit something inside him. "That wasn't luck," he murmured under his breath. "That old man knows things he shouldn't." On the opposite side of the arena, one of the guards, Hawkins, a grizzled veteran, narrowed his eyes. He'd seen countless aggressive inmates, reckless inmates, unstable inmates, but never an old man standing that calmly in front of 3 men ready to tear him apart. Hawkins had served in the military before becoming a correctional officer. He recognized posture, he recognized training, and Elias, he wasn't a regular inmate. Hawkins leaned toward another guard. "Keep an eye on him," he whispered. "Something's off there." But the quietest and perhaps most dangerous subplot was growing among inmates themselves. Some of the older prisoners, and especially those who lived outside the influence of the major factions, started seeing Elias as something unusual, a possibility, a quiet symbol that even a seemingly defenseless man could confront the dominant force. In a prison where fear was the primary currency, the idea that a solitary old man could disrupt the balance was enough to ignite hidden conversations. But Elias wasn't seeking leadership. He wasn't seeking respect. He wasn't seeking anything except surviving in peace. Yet, without wanting it, his presence had drawn attention. Attention he never asked for, but that would inevitably push him straight into the line of fire. As the crowd dispersed, each man carrying a slightly different version of what they believed had just happened, Drax finally stood up fully. His eyes, once filled with smug amusement, now burned with a mixture of humiliation and fury. He couldn't accept being thrown off balance, couldn't accept being made a fool of, especially when the old man hadn't even struck him. Just moved. Marlowe stepped closer. "We need to be smart now. Everyone saw it. If you go after him without thinking, you're just going to make it worse." "I don't want to think," Drax growled, voice boiling with rage. "I want to break that old man." "And that's exactly what he wants you to do," Marlowe replied. "Can't you see it? Every move of his was calculated. He's not just some old guy. He's done this before, a lot of times." Drax said nothing. A rare expression crossed his face. Not fear, but doubt. He didn't understand Elias, and men like him hated anything they couldn't understand. Meanwhile, Elias walked calmly out of the arena, still holding the bottle as if nothing had happened. His steps were steady, his posture relaxed, but his eyes scanned everything around him. He knew it wasn't over. He knew that moment had triggered something far bigger than anyone realized, and he knew the Three Fists wouldn't leave him alone. That confrontation hadn't been an ending. It was the beginning of a quiet war, a war where strategy mattered more than strength, where past and present would collide in ways no one could avoid. And Elias Mercer, the man forgotten by most, was about to become impossible to ignore. News of Drax's fall spread through Redstone Valley faster than fire tearing through dry grass. Every cell, every block, every forgotten corner whispered the same question. How did an old man drop the most feared fighter in the arena? The story traveled so quickly that within minutes it had already grown into a legend, exaggerated by some, twisted by others, but always circling the same point. Elias Mercer wasn't who they thought he was. Meanwhile, Elias walked across the yard toward North Block, followed by eyes that had ignored him for months, but now studied him, trying to understand who the man was who, without raising his voice, had shaken the most established hierarchy in the prison. The strange part was that Elias didn't seem to care. His gaze remained fixed on something no one else could see, a quiet, constant vigilance, like a man who always stayed one step ahead. At the same time, the Three Fists were holed up in their cell, deep in the East Block, an area guards avoided whenever possible. Drax paced back and forth, rage radiating from him with every step. The concrete floor seemed to tremble under his boots. "This isn't over," he growled. "That old man humiliated me in front of everyone." Marlowe, sitting on the lower bunk, kept his usual composure, though his eyes betrayed genuine concern. "That wasn't humiliation," he said. "It was strategy. He wasn't trying to beat you. He just revealed who he is." "Revealed what?" Drax exploded. "That he's some arrogant old fool?" "No," Marlowe corrected him, steady and firm. "That he's dangerous." Gunnar, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, shifted uncomfortably, a rare break in his usual stone-faced posture. "I didn't like the way he moved," he muttered. "That's not how regular inmates move." The silence that followed weighed heavily. Then Marlowe lifted his head slowly, as if deciding to share something he'd been holding back. "I talked to someone in the upper tier," he said. "They said he spent years in solitary cells all over the country before ending up here. No clear reason, no violent history, like someone was trying to hide him or protect him from something." Drax let out a laugh, but it came out tight, almost nervous. "So what? The old man's some kind of secret assassin?" Marlowe didn't answer immediately. "I don't know what he is," he finally said, "but I'm sure he's seen things, worse things, than anything that happens in this place." That was the part that enraged Drax more than anything. Someone who didn't fear him. He couldn't tolerate that. Ever since his teenage years roaming the streets, fear had been his currency, his weapon, his armor. And anyone who didn't fear him was a threat. While they talked, something happened in the yard that would change the course of the silent war underway. Elias Mercer, walking alone, was stopped by a group of inmates, only 4 of them, but their expressions revealed something far more complex than hostility. They were men from factions that rivaled the Three Fists, men who rarely aligned with anyone. But now they stood there, discreetly blocking the old man's path. Their leader, a man named Roman, stepped forward. "Mercer," he began quietly, "we want to talk." Elias kept his calm but alert stare. "About what?" Roman glanced around, making sure no one was listening. "About opportunities, about balance, about changes this place needs." Elias let out a subtle exhale. "I'm not here to lead anything," he said. "I don't get involved in internal politics." "We're not asking you to lead," Roman replied, voice steady. "We're asking to survive, and you've shown that you can level the playing field." This was the turning point Elias had feared since day one, becoming a symbol. He didn't want it. He never asked for it, but at that moment, it was clear that his choice no longer mattered. His very existence was already reshaping Redstone Valley. But the real turning point came minutes later. An alarm blared across the yard, sharp, urgent, unmistakable. Guards sprinted toward East Block, shouts erupted, doors slammed, the entire yard tensed instantly. At the center of the chaos, Drax was on the ground, blood running down his face, not because of Elias, not because of a fight in the arena, but because someone had attacked him. Fast, silent, unseen, guards yelled for the area to be locked down. Inmates fought to see through the bars. Gunnar roared in fury, holding Drax by the shoulders. Marlowe stared, trying to piece together the moment. Roman stepped back, eyes narrowing. "This changes everything," he murmured. From a distance, Elias watched and felt something heavy settle over him. Who would they blame for the attack? The rival factions, a lone dissenter, one of Drax's many enemies, or him? Because in a place where rumors were more powerful than truth, a single unexpected move was enough to spark a full-scale war. And in that exact moment, Elias realized his past, the one he had buried so meticulously, was about to resurface in a way he wouldn't be able to stop. The old man wasn't just an old man, and from that point on, no one would be able to pretend otherwise. The attack on Drax hit Redstone Valley like a silent bomb, an explosion no one heard, but whose shrapnel tore through every corner of the prison. The siren was still echoing through the corridors when guards formed barricades between the blocks, trying to contain the chaos. Some inmates were shoved against the bars, others backed away, afraid of being caught up in whatever was unfolding. But everyone wanted to see it. The leader of the Three Fists was on the ground, bleeding, struggling to breathe. Gunnar shouted incoherent threats, consumed by rage. It took 2 guards to restrain him, and 2 more to keep Marlowe from charging forward, demanding answers. Their frustration was justified. Drax was never caught off guard. That was part of his legend, part of the aura he had built. To be attacked like that, without noticing, without reacting, it didn't just injure his body. It injured his reputation. It injured the structure that held their trio at the top. Rumors began before Drax's blood even hit the floor. It was revenge. Old score. Someone from South Block. He was sent. It was planned. It was the old man. That last whisper spread like lightning. One careless look, one misinterpreted moment, one inmate repeating what he thought he saw. And suddenly, Elias Mercer, who had been on the opposite side of the yard when the attack happened, became the prime suspect. Not because of evidence, but because he existed in the wrong moment, and because he dropped Drax hours earlier in front of the entire prison. The guards began rounding up inmates in an attempt to isolate witnesses, but witnesses in Redstone Valley were never reliable. Everyone had their version, their alliances, their grudges, and beneath all those conflicting stories, one uncomfortable truth emerged. Many wanted to see the Three Fists fall. This mysterious attack looked like the first step toward that fall. Meanwhile, Elias watched in silence, leaning against a wall as if his heartbeat hadn't changed at all. But inside, he knew better. None of this was coincidence. Someone was moving pieces on the board, and they wanted the balance destroyed. They wanted the blame to land on him. Roman approached from the side, keeping his head down to avoid attention. "Mercer, this just got serious," he whispered. "They're coming for you." "I know," Elias replied, eyes still fixed on the chaos in East Block. Roman frowned, studying him. "You always seem to know. That's what's scary." "It's not knowing," Elias corrected softly. "It's experience." That line stuck in Roman's mind. He'd seen plenty of experienced men in prison, but Elias was different. He didn't react impulsively. He didn't break under pressure. He didn't hide. He simply observed, like someone trained to recognize chaos from miles away and survive it. Inside the makeshift infirmary, Drax was being treated. The gash above his eyebrow was deep. His lip was split. There were marks on his neck and shoulder, strikes delivered with speed, precision, and intent to incapacitate. These weren't the strikes of an average inmate. Marlowe stood beside the cot, narrowing his eyes with analytical focus. "Whoever did this knew exactly where to hit," he muttered. "This wasn't random. It was professional." Gunnar, still burning with rage, cracked his knuckles. "Whoever it was, I'll find them, and I swear they'll pay." Marlowe didn't answer. Something far bigger was forming in his mind. He replayed the old man's movements in the fighting pit, the footwork, the economy of motion, the hollow but razor-sharp stare, the almost military precision. A chill slid down Marlowe's spine. "No, it can't be," he whispered, too low for Gunnar to hear. Up above the yard, Donovan Price, the architect, watched with a slow, knowing smile. "Perfect," he murmured. "It's starting exactly the way I wanted." Donovan wasn't loyal to anyone. He didn't lead factions. He didn't look for fights. He looked for opportunities, and Elias Mercer, with his buried past and quiet power, was the most valuable opportunity the prison had ever offered him. Meanwhile, guards began reorganizing the blocks. The prison warden, Kellen Briggs, arrived in person to assess the situation. "Who did this?" he demanded. No one answered. Elias gave one last look at Drax being rushed away. He understood exactly what came next. Once the attacker was officially declared unknown, someone would be chosen to take the fall, and the chosen man was always the most convenient target. Elias Mercer was now the most talked-about name in Redstone Valley, not because he wanted to be, but because he'd become impossible to ignore. The attack on Drax wasn't the end of the conflict. It was the beginning, the true beginning, of the war. Night settled over Redstone Valley like a sheet of iron, heavy, suffocating, and unnervingly quiet. After the attack on Drax, the entire prison moved into a state of high alert. Guards paced back and forth with flashlights, inmates whispered through their bars, and the usual nighttime noises, cards shuffling, whistling, footsteps on catwalks, were swallowed by a thick, uneasy silence. Everything felt suspended, like the entire penitentiary was waiting for the next move, in a game it didn't fully understand. And at the center of that darkened board sat Elias Mercer. He rested in the corner of his cell, appearing calm, almost relaxed. But his mind worked with surgical precision. Every detail of the attack on Drax ran through his thoughts, not out of fear, but out of analysis. He recognized signatures when he saw them. Quick strikes, targeted pressure points, calculated incapacitation. That wasn't gang violence, that was technique. Refined, disciplined, military-grade technique. The kind men like him were trained to identify. Elias breathed deeply. If someone with that training was inside Redstone Valley, then nothing happening here was coincidence. Meanwhile, in the corridors, Roman approached cautiously. He respected Elias, but he also understood that the old man was unpredictable in ways that even the toughest inmates found unsettling. Stopping in front of the cell, he spoke in a low voice. "Elias, they're gonna pin this on you. It's only a matter of hours." The old man opened his eyes slowly. "I know." Roman gripped the bars, anxious. "Then you have to do something. If Drax says it was you, nobody will question it. And the guards, they'll take the most convenient version. Always." Elias tilted his head, thinking. "Acting without direction is acting blind," he said. "And acting blind is the fastest way to die." Roman exhaled sharply. That was the problem with Elias. He didn't react to fear or impulse. He reacted to strategy, and strategy created a distance most prisoners couldn't cross. "Then tell me what to do," Roman insisted. "I know you understand more than you show." Elias stayed silent for several seconds before finally answering, "I need to find out who did this before they choose the easiest scapegoat." That sentence marked the beginning of Elias's rise inside the prison. Until then, he'd been surviving quietly. Now he understood he needed to move, to act, to use, for the first time in years, everything he'd tried to bury. In the days that followed, Elias walked through quiet blocks, forgotten corners. He spoke with men no one noticed, listened to stories no one dared repeat, gathered fragments others ignored. His calm, direct presence drew attention, but never threatened. He knew how to listen. He knew how to observe. He knew how to build bridges without promising anything, and piece by piece he built an invisible map of Redstone Valley. What he found wasn't pretty. Donovan Pryce was manipulating conversations. Gunnar and Marlowe were preparing for revenge. The guards were internally divided, and rumors about an external force, a trained, hidden, infiltrated someone, were rising from testimonies no one believed, except Elias. And during this process, something unexpected happened. Inmates who once dismissed the old man began seeking him out. Some asked for advice, some asked for protection, some simply wanted to understand how a quiet, thin, seemingly fragile old man stood so firm amid chaos. Elias didn't want followers, but in prison, silent strength always attracts those who recognize it. And that strength was reshaping his image inside Redstone Valley. At the same time, inside the medical block, Drax slowly regained consciousness. Still groggy, aching everywhere, he pushed through the pain, because the physical wounds were nothing compared to the burn of humiliation. When he opened his eyes and saw Marlowe and Gunnar at his bedside, his voice came out rough. "Who was it?" Marlowe hesitated. "We still don't know." The pause angered Drax. "You know," he rasped. "I saw it in your eyes. You know who they're gonna blame." Marlowe looked down. "Elias," Drax clenched his jaw, fists trembling. "Then we go after him. When I get out of this bed, he's dead." But Marlowe held his arm. "Not so fast. None of this makes sense. He could have killed you in the arena. He had the chance, and he didn't. This," he gestured at the wounds, "isn't his style." Drax hated logic. He hated thinking. But a seed of doubt lodged itself in his mind. And where there is doubt, there is hesitation. And where there is hesitation, there is opportunity. Meanwhile, Elias walked into the empty yard, breathing in the cold dawn air. His body carried old pains, scars loaded with memories heavier than any concrete wall. But the prison, unintentionally, was reigniting something inside him he thought he had left behind. Purpose. He was no longer just an old man surviving. He was changing, rebuilding, reactivating muscles, external and internal, that had been dormant far too long. And for the first time since arriving, Elias Mercer understood his role inside that place. It wasn't to flee the conflict, it was to survive it, and if necessary, to master it. The turning point had already passed. Now, the ascent was beginning. The days following the attack plunged Redstone Valley into a state of silent boil. Nothing happened openly. No straight-up fights, no ambushes, no explosions of violence. But that only made the atmosphere more dangerous. Everyone felt it. The prison was stretched thin, balanced on a fragile point that could snap with the slightest wrong move. Meanwhile, Elias Mercer walked the yard with his usual calm, though inside he knew the worst was still on the horizon. Redstone Valley ran on three things: fear, power, and survival, and right now all three were aimed squarely at him. The attack on Drax hadn't been forgotten, only buried under forced silence. The guards kept investigating, but everyone knew the investigation was nothing more than procedure to satisfy paperwork. Finding who did it wasn't the priority. Preventing a war between factions was, and to do that, someone had to take the fall. Elias was at the top of the list. Every corridor he walked down came with eyes turning toward him. Not with disdain, not with curiosity, but with expectation. Inmates who had never noticed him before now watched his movements with a kind of cautious respect, as if sensing that something about him mattered far more than his quiet posture let on. Everyone understood. Elias was the key, either to the fall of the Three Fists, or to the destruction or salvation of the fragile balance that held the prison together. But someone was watching even more closely. Donovan Price, the architect. From his second-floor cell, Donovan had a perfect view of the yard. He watched Elias with the same fascination a mathematician has when a rare equation finally reveals its logic. Donovan was a born strategist. He controlled information, fears, whispers, and timing with surgical precision. And to him, Elias was the perfect variable, the rare opportunity to reorder the prison according to his own ambitions. That afternoon, Donovan summoned one of the quietest inmates, a man known simply as Baxter. "Go to the old man," Donovan said without looking away from Elias. "Tell him I want to meet tonight. Alone." Baxter swallowed hard. "Won't that look suspicious?" "Everything looks suspicious in Redstone Valley," Donovan replied with a thin smile. "The difference is that some suspicions strengthen the ones who know how to use them." As Baxter slipped away, Donovan kept studying Elias. He saw what most inmates never would. It wasn't just the technique, the posture, the calm. It was the emotional control, the absolute equilibrium you only see in someone who has witnessed the worst of humanity and learned to stand steady inside it. And that meant only one thing. Elias Mercer wasn't just dangerous. He was useful. Later, after the sun dipped behind the concrete walls, Elias made his way to the darkest corner of North Block, where Baxter waited. "Donovan wants to speak with you," Baxter said, trying and failing to hide the nervous tremor in his voice. Elias didn't look surprised. "I knew this was coming," he said. "It's urgent." Elias studied him for a moment. The trembling said more than the words. "Tell him I'll be there." The meeting took place after the guards' final rounds, when the prison was wrapped in shadow. Elias entered Donovan's cell with no hesitation. The architect sat at a small table, looking more like a man preparing a business pitch than someone initiating a dangerous alliance. "Elias Mercer," Donovan said with a slight nod. "The man of the hour." Elias said nothing. Donovan smiled. "I'll be direct. I know you didn't attack Drax. I know you didn't plan anything. But someone is trying to make you the centerpiece of this war. What do you want? Elias asked. To understand the game, Donovan replied, folding his hands. And maybe to play it at your side. Elias narrowed his gaze. I'm not interested in alliances. But you're interested in surviving, Donovan countered. And right now the only way to survive is to understand that the Three Fists are coming for you. It doesn't matter if you're innocent. It doesn't matter if you never touch them. Truth means nothing in here. Narrative means everything. Elias didn't look away. What exactly are you proposing? He asked. Donovan stood and walked to the bars, staring out at the empty yard. I'm proposing information. I'm proposing foresight. I'm proposing showing you who really attacked Drax before Drax comes for you. Elias didn't move, but his silence spoke volumes. He didn't trust Donovan, and Donovan knew it. Yet Elias also understood he would have to move now, make decisions, and confront his past with brutal honesty, because the same shadow that trained him to survive was coming back to claim him. The stage for the next escalation was set. The Three Fists wanted vengeance. Donovan wanted control. The guards wanted order. The factions wanted balance. The prison wanted blood. And only one man, standing at the center of this labyrinth, had the skill to determine the fate of everyone: Elias Mercer. The night following Elias Mercer's conversation with Donovan Pryce was the quietest since he'd arrived at Redstone Valley. But it wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that hangs in the air before a storm everyone knows is coming, but no one knows when it will strike. Entire cell blocks felt like they were holding their breath. Guards walked with tighter grips on their flashlights. Inmates watched from behind bars with restless eyes. Everyone sensed something was being arranged, something big, and Elias knew. He knew because he'd felt this same silence in villages, surrounded by insurgents, in dark forests, hours before ambushes, in cities where every step was watched from the rooftops. It was the silence before the inevitable collision. At dawn, the yard opened as usual, but no one went to train, walk, or talk. Every inmate headed straight to the arena, pulled as if by an invisible force. The arena had never been so silent. The Three Fists were already there, standing at the center like stone sentinels. Drax's face still bore the wounds, but his eyes burned with the fury of revenge. Marlowe and Gunnar stood beside him, different, coiled, armed. Elias entered through the north gate, walking alone. No bottle, no expression. Just himself, and the weight of a past that had begun clawing back to the surface. When the old man stepped onto the sand, a ripple of whispers swept through the arena. Everyone knew the moment had arrived. This wasn't a normal fight. This wasn't a territorial dispute. This was the reckoning that would change everything. Drax stepped forward, fist clenched. You already know why you're here, he growled. Elias didn't move. I know. You dropped me once, Drax spat, but that was before I learned the truth. The arena froze. The word truth was volatile inside Redstone Valley. Elias lifted one eyebrow. What truth? Drax pointed at him with his gloved hand. You attacked me, in the shadows, like a coward. You attacked me. The crowd shifted and murmured. It was the narrative everyone feared. But Elias didn't flare up. He simply breathed. It wasn't me, he said calmly. Marlowe stepped forward. That's exactly what someone trained would say. Elias studied him for a moment. Trained by who? The mood in the arena shifted instantly. The Three Fists exchanged glances. They knew the way Drax had been attacked wasn't amateur work, but they didn't expect Elias to address it like that, direct, firm, and dangerously aware. Marlowe tried to regain control. You think we didn't notice? You dodged Drax's punches like you were... He swallowed. Like you were a professional. Elias didn't look away. A professional doesn't strike from behind. A professional picks the moment to fight. A professional observes, analyzes, calculates. Gunnar moved in aggressively. "You're trying to confuse us." "No," Elias replied firmly. "I'm trying to stop you from walking straight into someone else's game." The entire arena sucked in air. Up on the west block, Donovan Price smiled. He loved watching the pieces move, but Drax didn't care about logic. He cared about blood. He charged forward like a raging bull, and Elias didn't step back. The ring vibrated with tension as the two came within striking distance. Drax raised his arm for a devastating blow. And that's when it happened. A sharp, metallic click sliced through the silence. Not a gunshot, not a knife, a handcuff lock being released. Heads snapped sideways. A hooded man, someone no one recognized, was already inside the arena. His movements were smooth, precise, trained. He didn't go for Drax. He went straight for Elias. He moved fast, unnaturally fast. Elias sensed it before anyone else, and that was the moment Redstone Valley saw who he really was. The old man slipped past the first strike by leaning 3 centimeters. The second swing grazed his shoulder. The third was blocked, not with force but with perfect timing. The attacker tried a necklock. Elias twisted his wrist, broke the rhythm, slid his body and dropped the man with a single circular movement, using the attacker's own momentum. The entire arena recoiled as one. No one had ever seen anything like it. The hooded man scrambled to get up. Elias walked to him, knelt down and yanked off the hood. The yard froze. There, tattooed on the back of the man's neck, was a symbol Elias knew better than anyone, and one no inmate should ever see: the insignia of the Shadow Unit. The secret military unit Elias had commanded, the unit of ghosts, the unit of legends, the unit of trained assassins. Drax stepped back, pale. Marlowe didn't move. Gunnar lost every ounce of aggression, and the entire yard finally understood the truth. Elias Mercer wasn't just some old man. He wasn't just another inmate. He wasn't someone who could be intimidated. He was the king of special forces, and someone had sent a trained soldier inside Redstone Valley to kill him. Elias lifted his eyes toward the 3 fists and said only, "You're fighting the wrong war." And in that instant, Redstone Valley changed forever. The arena stayed silent for several long seconds, as if all the air had been sucked out of Redstone Valley. After Elias revealed the tattooed emblem on the back of the attacker's neck, no one even dared breathe too deeply. The hooded man tried to stand, but his body trembled, not from pain, but from fear. Fear of the man who had taken him down with just 3 movements. Fear of the name the entire unit had sworn never to face. Elias Mercer. The 3 fists didn't move. They were frozen between disbelief and terror. For the first time since entering the prison, Drax had no answer. His rage seemed to collapse under the weight of what he'd just witnessed. He wasn't standing in front of a stronger enemy. He was standing in front of something beyond everything he understood about power. Elias rose slowly, his eyes locked on the fallen soldier. "Who sent you?" he asked. Calm, low, steady. The man didn't reply. He only swallowed hard and turned away, revealing the truth without saying a word. The order had come from above the guards, above the warden, above the walls of Redstone Valley. Something bigger, deeper, far more dangerous. Around them, inmates took instinctive steps back. For the first time, no one looked at Elias with suspicion or curiosity. They looked at him with respect, not the cheap respect granted to brute force, but the quiet, reverent respect reserved for legends who walk unnoticed, carrying more history than others can possibly understand. Drax stepped forward. "Mercer!" he rasped, voice cracking with uncertainty. "All this. Who are you?" Elias watched him for a long moment. There was no arrogance in his eyes, no threat, only truth. "I'm just someone who spent a lifetime fighting monsters," he said. "But none of them were ever as destructive as the fear you spread in here." The sentence hit the arena like an invisible strike. Marlowe lowered his head. Gunnar exhaled sharply. Drax had no words left. The presence of the defeated soldier made it undeniable. Elias wasn't the threat they imagined. He was the target. And if someone was trying to eliminate him, the reason was far larger than any yard rivalry. Guards ran into the arena, drawn by the commotion. When they saw the hooded man bleeding on the ground, chaos erupted, orders overlapping, voices shouting, confusion spreading. But the inmates stayed still. What they had witnessed was bigger than any guard's reaction. Elias turned his back on all of them and walked away from the arena. Each step echoed through the silent yard, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. For the first time, the prison felt too small for the truth that had just been revealed. And as Elias disappeared down the narrow corridor, one shared thought connected every watching pair of eyes. No one should have messed with that old man. And now, stopping what was coming would be impossible. The next morning, Redstone Valley felt like a different prison. Guards whispered in empty hallways. Inmates avoided fights, afraid of waking something larger. And in the monitoring room, Warden Kellen Briggs received an unmarked envelope. Inside, only a single sentence and a symbol printed in dark ink. "The king still lives, and you're the ones who let him wake." Briggs went pale. He recognized that emblem, a ghost from the country's military past. Meanwhile, in the quiet cell of the North Block, Elias Mercer opened his eyes again. The old man was awake, and the world had no idea what that truly meant. If this story kept you hooked from beginning to end, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps this video reach more people. Comment below. What would you do in Elias Mercer's place? Your opinion means a lot to this channel. And if you're not subscribed yet, take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications. We have many more intense stories like this on the way. If you want to keep the tension going, choose another video here on the channel and dive into the next chapter of this journey.